Supervisor Brown?
Present.
Supervisor McCowan?
Here.
Supervisor Woodhouse is absent. Supervisor Hamburg? Chair Jordy?
Here. And I'd like to invite our librarian, County Librarian Karen Horner to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the first thing we have on our agenda, as usual, is the public expression on non-agenda items. And so, first speaker is Sarah Wright, followed by Barbara McLean.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Wright with Mendocino Voice, and I wanted to ask about Supervisor Woodhouse now that we know a little bit more about his history in the past few months, including his multiple arrests and his temporary conservatorship. I'm wondering if anyone in the county government has spoken to anyone in the governor's office at the state level to discuss replacement for Supervisor Woodhouse, or if we can expect him to continue effectively representing the 3rd District.
Thank you, Chair Jordy. Carmel Angelo, CEO. We have a sitting supervisor in the 3rd District, and I think that that this board and county administration has made it very clear that there's really no action that we can take. And we wish Supervisor Woodhouse and his family the best, and we hope that he has a speedy recovery.
I'm sure we all do. Has there been any communication, though, with the governor's office?
Let me just say this, that as far as working with the governor's office, we have no reason to take action with the governor's office. There is an appointments unit. We have had a conversation with them, but there is absolutely no action that this board or this county is taking at this time. And we have made no request to the governor's office.
Are you at liberty to discuss the contents of the conversation with the governor's office?
Information, it was just information.
Thank you.
Barbara McLean.
Good morning, I'm Barbara McLean, and this morning I would like to briefly read a few excerpts from several articles which appeared in Sunday's papers. You may have read them, but if not, I'd like to bring a few points to your attention. This very morning, the Press Democrat reports that the Sonoma County Board of Supervisors is expected to decide the most important issues of whether rural residential neighborhoods are suitable for cannabis cultivation. Spokespeople from a group of 432 citizens who oppose growing in such zones wrote these remarks, and I quote, "The county could adopt a moratorium such as the cities of Sonoma, Windsor, and Hillsborough have. Why not slow down and let Mendocino, Trinity, and Humboldt counties be guinea pigs for this dangerous experiment on rural residents?" Strong language. A second article says the director of Permit Sonoma, the county's planning agency, is quoted as saying that depending on how the ordinance is ultimately crafted, he will need to hire 4 to 8 more enforcement officers, plus a supervisor and support persons to handle the regulation of medical cannabis operations. Something also. And finally, from Sunday's Journal, an editorial that says the AF review gives supervisors some latitude. The clear rejection of Measure AF in the November 8th election by Mendocino County voters should send a message to the county supervisors that more than a healthy majority of Mendocino County voters do not want to give marijuana growers the keys to the empire. The well-funded measure, which was probably a lot better funded than we know if all the cash likely traded hands was reported, this was intended in large part as a threat to county government. If you don't pass regulations we like, we'll just put it on our ballot. Well, it didn't work. AF lost, as you know, 62 to 38%. Supervisors should take this and the healthy margin of the win of their own marijuana tax measure as a sign that the voters trust them, you, to regulate marijuana sensibly. It should not be forgotten that this county has seen a lot when it comes to marijuana growing. We know how intrusive and environmentally damaging it can be. We don't mind people being in the marijuana business and finally paying some taxes, thank you. But we don't want that business in our faces and up our noses. The supervisors should continue to work energetically on new regulations for our county, given the legalization of recreational marijuana statewide. Local jurisdictions still have a great deal to say over how that new industry will affect us locally. We think the people who voted on November 8th clearly want the effect to be muted and containable. And I, speaking for myself, and a group of about 200 county residents in rural neighborhoods, R1 and RR zoning, submitted a petition that you've received. And we all firmly agree with these concerns that were expressed in these articles. Thank you.
Rich Molinari, the animal shelter manager.
Good morning. My name is Rich Molinari. I'm the new animal shelter manager here in Ukiah, Mendocino County. Just want to give you a little background, and then I'll just touch base on some miscellaneous topics. I'm excited to be here. I look forward to working with my animal team, the volunteers, and the community in Mendocino County. I have approximately 20 years of experience in animal control and animal shelters, working with the City of Las Vegas, Eagle County, Colorado, and the City and County of Denver. So it's involved animals, whether it's been on the road or in a shelter, I've probably handled it or dealt with it. I've been in a supervisory role for approximately 10 years and have managed anywhere from 8 to 18 people at a time. This December, the shelter team is in a giving spirit this holiday season, and we would like to show our appreciation to the community by adopting out spay and neutered cats and kittens with no fees. And that's going to take place next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So we want to have these cats and kittens out to good homes. So feel free to come down to the shelter and get a free kitten or a cat. We've reduced the cost for spay and neuter dogs at the shelter during that time frame of the 15th, 16th, and 17th to a $50 adoption fee, and then if you live in Mendocino County, it'll be a $25 license application as well. The shelter is excited to have 2 new part-time employees coming on board. They actually start today and tomorrow. With their addition, we'll be able to redistribute the workload amongst the staff and give the whole shelter team some extra time to focus on special projects and tasks that they would like to tackle. And in regards to shelter facility improvements, we have a painting crew coming in next week for the interior of the actual shelter, so we'll be painting from room to room, so we'll put a nice little sheen on the walls. So other than that, thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you.
Great.
Welcome to Mendocino County.
Thank you.
So the next thing on our agenda is the consent calendar. And, well, first of all, are there any other members of the public who want to speak on non-agenda items?
Good morning. My name is Sharisa Mata. I'm a volunteer and animal lover and foster in Mendocino County. I'd like to welcome Richard Molinari to our team and hope that he will listen to us as volunteers and community members to upgrade and just assist the animals in having a healthy transition and life here in the shelter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say, with respect to the cannabis cultivation ordinance currently under development, I think many of you know it is currently before the Planning Commission. It will next be on their agenda on December 15th. So anyone who would like to see changes in the ordinance, that's your first avenue of advocacy, is to convince the Planning Commission. And then they will be making recommendations that will then come back to us. Yeah, written comments can be submitted, of course, as well.
Any other public comments on non-agenda items? Not seeing any, we'll go to the consent calendar. Carla, has the proper notice been established?
Yes, proper notice has been established.
Are there any items that board members would like to pull from the consent calendar?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second. we have any public comment on the consent calendar items? Okay. See, we'll vote by the button.
Motion carries with Supervisor Woodhouse absent.
Okay, now we're on to item 5C, which is discussion and possible action regarding the allocation and programming of public, educational, and government paid access television fees and services in Medicine County, which is item 5C. Sponsor is the Executive Office.
Good morning, Chair. Christopher Shaver, Deputy CEO, Executive Office. The item I bring before you today is regarding PEG, Public Education and Governmental Access Television. So the Board of Supervisors entered into a franchise agreement with Ukiah Communications in April of 2005 for a 15-year period. The Board also approved in December of 2005 a transfer of said franchise agreement from Adelphia to Comcast. The franchise agreement provides for the payment of franchise fees and requires Comcast to provide public, educational, and governmental access channels, which is known as PEG, in return for that. So Adelphia, Comcast, what they do is make payments to the county. What they did in 2012 was grants for infrastructure improvements and so forth. There's been no further payments of those infrastructure grants. Those basically were loaded up front, and that those funds have been expended. The City of Willits, Fort Bragg, and City of Ukiah, they have similar agreements with Adelphia, Comcast for franchise fees, and they do receive fees on an annual basis also. I do not know the exact amounts that they receive at this time. So in 2014 and prior, the county has allocated its portion of PEG funding based upon the percentage of subscribers in each the regions. That's Willits, Fort Bragg, and Ukiah areas. So we have Willits Community Television, Mendocino Coast Television, who went insolvent in 2014. And they were selected as the PEG providers through a countywide RFP, and that happened in November of 2008. In July of 2013, Mendocino Coast Television, 2013, voted to dissolve their 501(c) nonprofit, and at that time, PEG funds were then allocated to the City of Willits and for the Ukiah area, as Fort Bragg did not have a provider. Fort Bragg went and entered into, conducted an RFP and hired their own PEG provider, and they wished to go independently at that time. So for the last fiscal year, there was an amount of $21,556 that the county allocated to the City of Fort Bragg for PEG services, and then also again 2016-17. There's an amount of $10,778 that's being allocated for PEG services to the City of Fort Bragg. In December of 2015, Mendocino Access Television provided notice to the county that MATV would no longer be capable of providing services pursuant to our agreement with them for PEG services. Prior to this, the county had already been experiencing service issues, and at that point in time, the county assumed the role of providing the governmental portion of PEG services only, and that includes broadcasting the Board of Supervisors meetings, which includes audio and video. During this time, staff has sought a legal opinion from Lieber, Cassidy, and Whitmore. Lieber, Cassidy's Whitmore opinion is that the county's current practice of providing government-only portion of PEG is within right and doesn't, the county is basically complying with those statutes and laws that govern that. In addition, the use of funds in providing for those services for the government only also meets our county code. The county is using portion of the unincorporated allocation of funds for in-house PEG-related services now being performed. MATV currently provides the public and educational component of PEG. However, the county is not contributing any funding to MATV due to several reasons. One is their leadership has changed several times over the course of the year, and their business is uncertain at this time. So a memorandum of understanding was executed between the city of Ukiah and the county pertaining to the disbursement of one-time PEG grant. And then also the county agreed to provide PEG services with that one-time grant funds used by the city of Ukiah and the county. And the county is obligated to do so until the year 2020. However, there's a provision in there that the county may exercise to cease those PEG services, and that's an option I will discuss down in the recommended actions. Willis Community Television is currently in operation. They've also received a portion of county PEG funding on an annual basis. Currently, their contract is set to expire on December 31st, 2016. And they had a contract for that fiscal year, and in the portion of fiscal year 2016-17 for a contract not to exceed $25,000. The term of the agreement, staff intends to extend until June 30th, 2017. So there are at least 3 possibilities the county may pursue in terms of franchise fees for PEG funding and services. The fees received on an annual basis is based off the number of subscribers in unincorporated areas, and the current trend for the last 3 years represents a decline in franchise fees for PEG funding. For an example, in 2013-14, $183,446 was received compared to 2015-16, which was $182,641. So right now, the county uses a portion of those fees to currently fund staffing and programming for the government portion of PEG. This includes the Board of Supervisors meetings. So the first option is to only provide the governmental programming portion of PEG and those services with county staff and equipment. Thereby, that would require the county to terminate the MOU with the city of Ukiah. The second option is to perform a countywide RFP with the goal of obtaining a single service provider for the entire county. The third option is to issue an RFP for PEG services and enter into agreements with regional providers, which has been the practice. The recommendation from staff is for the board to consider retaining the governmental portion of PEG and keep that in-house. In addition, the county has no legal obligation to provide public access, and that public access is minimally used currently at this time. Staff also recommends that the board consider terminating the MOU with the city of Ukiah, thereby eliminating our commitment to the city, and then provide public access through eliminate providing access through a third-party contractor. So if you have any questions, I'm prepared to answer them at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see if we have members of the public who
Sure.
want to address this. I don't have any questions for Chris.
Mello.
Okay. So, I'll go for it. Do we have another speaker?
There's several speakers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Board. Good morning, everybody. Cold morning. My recommendation is to put this into a committee that works with the public. I feel like the public has been cut out. I am the public. It's moving way too fast. There's 5 years into developing what we have over at the facility, and I'd like to invite the board to come to the facility for the 16th. We're having a festival over there, a greet and meet, so that anybody that hasn't been there, particularly the board as well as the public, can come and see the facility. What we've got going on over there is taking many, many hours of people, all of the people. And here we are, we need to spend more time. It hasn't been as successful. I don't consider it a failure at all. We're just in a low tide, a low point right now. That's why I think if we get into the committee, let the committee work with the public, come up with plans, get more input, invigorate down. You know, that's not, Channel 3 is a public, it's not a governmental, this is not for the government. I don't know what this is. I mean, do we have to hire an attorney to do this? You know, so let's get to the festival. If you haven't been to the facility, it's a beautiful facility. Malo, who I support right now, who's the interim, he's got great energy. There's great energy behind him. Give it a chance. Get to the committee, let the committee meet with the people, and I'm sure it'll all go really good. Thank you.
Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, Louis.
Thank you. Jimmy Rickle.
I'd rather have Mr. Malo, the director, speak first, please.
Good morning to everybody. My name is Emmanuel Malo. I'm presently coordinating the activities for Medicine and Access Television. I've been doing that since a couple of months ago. And we've been trying to do our best to save the television. And we realized that this television has been existing for the past 6 years. It was in an inception stage. And we know that in this country to start out business is not easy. And for 5 years, they've stood their ground. They've put television in place. And in the past year, we had no funding, but we went ahead and did what we could to make sure that there is access for the public. The public should have their voice and have television. We improved on viewership, we improved on programs, and because we didn't have funding, we couldn't effectively work on our equipment, but we provided services for the community for the past year. The next year, that is coming 2017, we have a plan which we submitted copies to the board of directors to take a look. It's a very solid plan, and that plan is to help the community, to help our producers, and to ensure that the funds that are disbursed for community television are well executed, and that the members of the community should be able to enjoy the services that we have worked so hard to establish for them. I think it is very important for this board to understand that this is the voice of the community we are trying to protect, and that we are working very hard to make sure that this voice keeps on going on and improving. The services are great. We've started a new website which is creating a multimedia, incorporating internet into television, which is a good thing for the community. We see people coming up with new programs, we see new producers coming up, and we think that to drop it at this point, it's a waste of resources. We're asking the board of directors to direct this into a committee if it's possible, or to disperse the funds that need to be dispersed so that MATV continue to provide the services and improve on whatever services they are working on for the community. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to listen to us, and I hope that you make the right decision for the people of this community. Thank you very much.
I have one question, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Because I understand that part of the funding for Mendocino Access TV, it was always intended that it would rely on membership. And could you tell us how many current members there are that are helping financially support the station?
Presently, we have about 43 members, and we, for the past year, we had about 20 contributors who contributed for the funding of the television. And just for the past 3 weeks, we've had about 4 more members coming in, and there are promises that more people are coming in to contribute. There's a lot happening right now. And we hope that on the 16th of December, when we're launching the introduction of the official introduction of television to the people and the facilities we have to offer and that we'll be working on, I think there will be more people coming.
Thank you.
What is the viewership of MATV? Is it Ukiah Valley only? I'm not very well versed. I know there's, we heard a comment about the Willits operation being fairly well established and is going forward. We heard about we know what happened in Fort Bragg a couple of years ago. But MATV has continued to function mostly to serve Ukiah Valley, is that correct?
Yes, we serve Ukiah Valley, but we realize that our programs are also watched in Fort Bragg. They are watched almost
Okay.
all over the county.
So they can be viewed all
Yes.
around the county?
Yes, and
With,
we expect the viewership to increase because we are including the internet on our services, which means we are building up a platform that will expand beyond Mendocino County.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
Okay.
Good morning, Jimmy Rickle, most of you know me. I've been an access producer since 1990 with some RO regional occupation training. I'm probably the oldest and longest access producer in the county. I provide a lot of programs. I go out and do at least 13 programs a year for Access TV. I assisted the last group of board members and facilitators. I now support Malo, his plan. Basically, I go out and produce programs where there be interviewing supervisors or what it may be, and then I provide it to Access TV to broadcast. So I kind of support the need to keep that entity going. It's important that there's a lot of community members who don't have internet savvy. Seniors primarily are the ones who watch TV, surf around, and find what they're looking for. And once the MATV starts consistently at a certain hour provide a program, then they know when to watch and they flip in that particular channel. I personally have 4 days a week at different hours, so folks will get an idea when my programs will come up. Normally they run a week or two and then I produce another one. What I've been able to do this last year is learn some new things for this old editor. I've got equipment from the 90s that I still use, but this year I actually bought a computer, a software program, struggled with how to learn that. I'm still learning it, and staff, those that were on board then, Milo's been helpful, have helped teach me how to upload stuff to YouTube, to a Facebook page. So I'm learning all sorts of new things, and I kind of depend on Access TV as my vehicle. Ken Steely, which isn't here, we got him involved this year, and he's kind of gone crazy. He's interviewed 20, 30 people who enjoyed getting exposure. So I support the committee idea. If you have any questions, or I can also offer my marketing skills. I've marketed my own program now for over 10 years. And that's one thing I think is missing in the Access TV entity, is somebody specifically focusing on trying to get the community to help finance the cost of equipment, personnel. I mean, you gotta have people to train me, and you gotta tell me at least 10 times before it sinks in, so there's a time management issue. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, well, I would like to give a little bit of history to this. Back when this contract was negotiated with, I think it was actually Adelphia, and then it transferred over to Comcast. At the time, the city of Fort Bragg was providing a pretty significant share of its franchise revenues to the cable peg station on the coast. And the agreement that went forward was, and Fort Bragg did this first, gave 50% of its franchise revenues to the peg station, and then I think a year or two later, the county upped it to 50%. And so Fort Bragg and the county were giving 50% of the revenue derived from the coast subscribers to the coast peg station, and then the same was set aside for the Ukiah station. Eventually, the Ukiah station, I think a year or two later, was formed, but the money was held in abeyance for the Ukiah station, so that they they had a fairly large sum of money, because I think roughly half of the cable subscribers in the county are, if not slightly more than half, maybe 55–60% are here in Ukiah Valley. And roughly 30% are on the coast, and a fairly small percentage outside of Willett city limits. And at the time, there was discussion among the PEG providers that maybe the request to the county should be that there be an equal amount to the 3 stations, because truthfully, there's pretty much a fixed cost to running a station, whether you have 8,000 viewers or 3,000 viewers, it really doesn't matter, you have the same costs. But that wasn't the request. The request was to make it proportional to the number of subscribers from each area. So I just want to put that out there, that over half of the subscribers who are on the coast aren't residents of Fort Bragg city limits. They live outside of city limits. And if you think about it, the people who want to watch, say, the school board meetings or the hospital board meetings or Recreation and Park District or the Harbor District meetings, many of those people don't live in Fort Bragg city limits. And so a PEG station, whether it's a complete PEG station or just a government access station, there should be, in my mind, some financial support for that operation on the coast from the county, because it's only the city and the county that receive these cable franchise revenues. The other issue is there's a diminishing amount of cable franchise revenues coming in. Fewer and fewer people subscribe to cable, more and more people go to satellite. We live in a county where the cable company is basically refusing to invest in the infrastructure here. And you know, it's not really the fault of city or county government, that's just a business transaction or business decision by Comcast. And finally, the cable, unless something has changed in recent years, the coast, the Willits area, and the Ukiah metro areas are not interlinked. They're connected through the internet, so they can send a program either by through the mail, the DVD, or they can email it over to the coast or to Willits, but they're not interconnected. And that's, again, because the cable company, Adelphia, and then later Comcast, unless something's changed very recently, have not invested in connecting those together. So that kind of has created the problem that you then almost have to have 3 PEG stations or 3 government access stations, because there's these 3 service areas where programming has to be transmitted locally from each of the 3 areas. So my hope is that we would keep hope alive that there would be a PEG station in each of the 3 communities. Short of that, and I think it's sort of a losing battle, because there will be fewer and fewer subscribers, there's fewer and fewer revenues coming in, but at least recognize that there are 3 service areas and that there should be some contribution from the county for at least a government access station in each of the 3 areas. So those are my thoughts on it.
Supervisor Jerky. If I may, I'd like to address at least one of your points. I think it somewhat ties back to Supervisor Hamburg's question earlier about whether Ukiah area programming could be seen, you know, in the other areas. And Supervisor Jerdy is right from our understanding that they are all separate at this point in time. Now, through the internet or sending a DVD and having them distributed on the sort of Fort Bragg cable network, that's the only way for that programming to be seen in other areas. Now, Deputy CEO Shaver has talked with both the South Coast cable provider and Comcast about the possibility of linking all those networks, for example, so that Board of Supervisor meetings here in Ukiah could be sent out over all of the cable networks, rather than right now, literally we would have to send a recording, a DVD or whatever over there, and then they can play it over their programming. And they have told us, the South Coast system has told us that they can do that. They can set that up so that they could receive it and broadcast it, just like you're in Ukiah. Comcast hasn't given us an official firm answer, but they told us that they don't feel like there's any reason that couldn't happen. And our discussions with our IT staff feel like that we can help accommodate that if necessary. So while that is certainly the case now, our understanding at this point is that that hurdle could be overcome with Comcast partnership and then the South Coast station as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, in terms of the options submitted. With the second one, it's not clear if the countywide RFP were issued, but I'm possibly assuming that that would be for governmental services only, a single provider for governmental services, or would that be for PEG services?
For PEG services.
So there's actually quite a few more options than what is represented here, I think.
Well, there may be, I mean, in your example of PEG services, I mean, I think this, at least the city of Fort Bragg and the city of Ukiah have been more responsive in the discussions than the city of Willits. But at least the city of Ukiah and the city of Fort Bragg, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but they're interested in working with the county in potentially pursuing a countywide RFP for PEG services, but they're also kind of in the same situation we are, that I think with the sort of community demand there and the way people are accessing information, whether it be government or other programming, that they would also be fine with just providing government access only on their own without a countywide RFP or other third-party vendor to do that. You know, with the Granicus setup that at least 3 entities I've mentioned all have now, it's relatively easy to access those meetings online. And, you know, I should mention probably too, in related to Ukiah, City of Ukiah administration has conveyed to us that regardless of what we would do, what your board would do with a PEG provider in the Ukiah area, they do not have intention of providing any of their franchise fee revenue toward that purpose. So it would be a county-funded responsibility.
And then when we're talking about, and PEG, of course, is public, educational, and governmental, but when we're talking about the public part of it, the model that has been followed is that what that entails is to have a space, as in a studio, where the public can come in, equipment is available, they can receive training, they can have access to the equipment, they can participate in doing their own programming or learning production or all these other different types of activities associated with broadcasting. So is that more or less correct?
Yes, I believe so. And, you know,
so, well, I just wanted to, you know, get that out there so we understand what we're talking about when we say public. But it seems like the model of trying to maintain a station and provide the equipment hasn't been one that is well supported by the community. And so, you know, we're told for the Ukiah area station, there's currently 43 members. I believe that'd be a high watermark for the last several years. So there aren't a lot of people that are coming forward to support this model financially or to participate in it. So there's been such an explosion of information technology that it's not like people no longer have access to information. So I think one decision we could probably make is, do we support the continuation of funds going to support that model? Or do we want to focus instead on what's the best way to support the governmental programming, which I think is vital. And I think it does include more than just the Board of Supervisors and other county-wide bodies like Local Agency Formation Commission and Mendocino Council of Governments. I think it does include the hospital district or the recreation district or the sanitation district. So, you know, I think to me that should be our focus, is how do we best provide support to recording and broadcasting the governmental meetings that are of most interest to our communities, plural, and how do we best cost effectively and with regional equity, support that model. So that's the direction I'd like to see us go in. And it might be appropriate to have a committee. The board has not had a lot of involvement with this issue. It was back before us last in February, I believe, when we approved what turned out to be a short-lived contract with an individual to do inventory at the Ukiah station and help develop an RFP. That was back in February. And I think that was just a report to us that this individual had been hired for this purpose. And now this is the first time it's been back before us since then. So I think it's worth taking a little time for. And of course, I'd love to hear from my colleagues whether they are on the same page as I am regarding should we let go of the idea that we're maintaining stations for people to come in and have direct access to equipment, or is that something that, you know, events have kind of moved beyond that being a viable model?
Supervisor Brown?
Thank you, Chair Jurdy, and you, Supervisor McCowan. You're suggesting that we do have a committee. Would that be a standing committee to dive into this a little bit further? So what would be your prerogative?
I would think an ad hoc, and I don't think it has to take a long period of time to come back with a recommendation to the board, depending on what our discussion here is. I think we should all weigh in on what our thoughts are on this topic and what the future of governmental programming should look like.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure why we wouldn't refer this to a committee like General Government. What interests me is that there are at least a couple of speakers here this morning who feel that there is I heard what my colleague said about only 43 people who are actually paid members, but my experience with these stations has been that they do have the potential for gaining community support and being valuable resources for people who want to produce television programs, and certainly the point that Supervisor McCowan is making about access to meetings. I think that's very important. But my feeling about it is that if there is this energy in the community to create a model that not only does the governmental broadcasting, but also allows for some wider participation of people in doing public access programming, I don't want to squelch that. It seems like there's a relatively small amount of money, right, that we're talking about here. What is the total amount of money, Alan?
Well, so as is in the agenda summary, the actual franchise receipts from Comcast and the other provider, I keep forgetting their name now, but just over $180,000. Now, in doing some research on this, for a few years, the practice of the auditor's office was based on understanding that 50% of those revenues would be just considered general fund discretionary, and 50% would be dedicated to PEG services. Now, we actually did some research in trying to verify where that came from, and our clerk staff identified that the last actual direction from the board a number of years ago was that 20% of the franchise fee revenue be dedicated to PEG services, and the rest of it be used for general fund discretionary purposes. But regardless of all that history, the past few years, a little over $90,000 has been dedicated to providing PEG services, Ukiah, Willits, and Fort Bragg. And then, so this current budget year, a portion of that funding was diverted to support the new position and the county taking over the governmental access of providing board meetings and support.
You're talking about the
equipment and so forth. And so the agreements with Willits and Fort Bragg, we have worked with the cities, and their agreements were through the end of this calendar year. And we work with them to have new agreements through the end of this fiscal year in hopes that your board and the relative city councils could, we could have a future model figured out by that time. But we didn't feel like it was appropriate to make additional commitments beyond that point.
So we're talking about a total of about $90,000.
I mean, that's been the historical
Only
practice.
because someone made the decision not to follow the direction of the Board of Supervisors.
Not exactly sure when that changed, but that's the research that we.
Well, you've reported to us that several years ago, the board directed that 20% be reserved for pay.
Yes, that's correct.
And yet the practice has continued to be that 50% has gone to pay, roughly.
Yes.
So maybe we don't need to take any action at all.
Well, based on the information we have now, unless there's different direction from the board, I mean, I think when we, build a budget for the next year, we would go back to the previous board direction in building that. But, here's a time where we're, I think, looking at we've talked about the studio thing. Now, the equipment that has been purchased with those franchise fees is in the county possession, or it's not in the county possession, but it's supposed to be the county's equipment. If Mendocino Access TV wasn't providing that service anymore, and in fact, once we received a letter that they were going to be closing their doors, we sent a letter asking for that equipment back, and inventory was prepared and so forth, and we didn't push that any further because then they tried to reorganize, and there were a number of things going on. But that equipment would be available, but the reality is that the model has changed now, and this is really all I need to create a program and put it online for people to view. And so I think the importance of that equipment for a broader audience, that studio equipment, is somewhat diminished.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would still like to see this referred to a committee and specifically to allow members of the public who are intimately involved in this to give their input before the board makes a final decision. So I don't know what committee that would be, but again, Supervisor McCowan suggested an ad hoc committee. It seems like we've got this standing committee structure, we would just use it.
Supervisor Brown?
Thank you, Chair Judy, and what would concern me about that would be the timeline. And is that the reason you suggested an ad hoc, Supervisor McCowan?
Well,
being able to actively have meetings, so to speak, and with the ad hoc, meeting with staff and community participation would probably be able to meet sooner than the current schedule we have for standing committee. I'm fine with either.
So what's our deadline?
well, although we've just heard that contracts have been and are being extended until June, so there's no time crunch.
Okay.
Well, if I could interject, with the exception of Mendocino Access TV, that contract has expired, and the county does not have a contract and has no current plans of providing funding to them at this time.
So that'd be the sense of urgency, is to be able, because we have been hearing, frankly, from people associated with Mendocino Access Television that they've been asking for months. When is the RFP going to come out? Is an RFP coming out? So in that sense, I guess there is a bit of urgency. But again, and Supervisor Hamburg and I may be on a different page, and I may be on a different page from the rest of the board, but although I don't do it, many people do. So this is the public access, or a home computer or other equipment readily available to many people. So the fact that there have been efforts to support the studio model and build public support for it, it really hasn't proven out. And if that is feasible, there's nothing to stop people from continuing to try and support that on their own.
So I do think there is some sense of urgency, and I think clearly the issue of the Ukiah station, if they're out of funds in December 31st, that's obviously an urgent issue. But I think even just looking for next fiscal year, that'll be here very soon. And in terms of the city of Fort Bragg, city of Ukiah, city of Willits, planning what they're going to do, I think to the extent that we can move quickly is actually a benefit. I normally would support it going to general government, but I really do think that we have a fair amount of legwork to do, and I think there's lots of options out there, not just the model that we've had in the past. So I would support an ad hoc, given what I think is a lot of options we need to explore in a short amount of time.
Okay.
And I'd be willing to serve on the ad hoc.
As would I.
Okay, we got an
Great.
ad hoc. Where's the motion?
I also move that we assign the matter of the allocation and programming of PEG access television fees and services in Mendocino County to a Board of Supervisors ad hoc consisting of Supervisors Jurdy and McCowan.
Oh, I'll second.
Okay, well, we've had public comment, I guess we vote by the button.
Motion carries with Supervisor Woodhouse absent.
Thank you, we do need to take a break before our next item. They need some time to set up. That's a presentation. Are we gonna go to another item before we go to the presentation?